So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And today I'm delighted that we have back with us Peter Dixon, who's a director at Dudleys Consulting Engineers. So firstly, Peter, thank you for coming back and talking to us again about what things that have changed and things that have developed at Dudleys. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, perhaps firstly, and Dudleys, what you do and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that's fine, Chris. From our point of view, we are a civil and structural engineering consultancy. So that's one of the things whereby most people know who an architect is, what they do. They design buildings, they design places we go to and use. We work very closely with them, and we are the ones that, I suppose, make the buildings stand up. We make roads go somewhere that they're not too steep, not too flat, whatever it may be. And then the drains and sewers that everybody forgets about, that's underground and buried, we make sure that they flow properly, work properly, and it can be buried and hidden and forgotten and just work well. So we do a lot of the, I think, unseen things, and generally it's just solving problems for clients that want to get something built.
Brilliant. And as you say, there's so many things that we don't see that have to be right. You know, you mentioned drains, of course. If they're not flowing correctly, that is a major problem.
I think if everything's working well for what we do, people are blissfully unaware. Whereas I'll walk into a shop, I'm looking down at where the drains and things are, or I'm looking up at what the structure is holding the roof up, but nobody's ever bothered about that otherwise.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we spoke last year, and I'm keen to know what's changed for you in the business since we last spoke.
Well, from our point of view, we've just, I suppose, tried to keep on developing and evolving a little bit further. That where we've had a bit of a transition in terms of, as the business, where myself and my colleague Paul have been directors for the last 3 or 4 years now, where we'd worked with Andy, that was kind of one of the founding directors and partners of the business.
Yeah,
we've kind of seen a share sort of ownership scheme that's coming to fruition. So now we are kind of equity partners with Andy in the business.
Brilliant.
That bit of an evolution of the logo and the branding behind us, that it's just tried to develop and change from where we've got a slightly broader offering of services now to establish ourselves more and almost like a bit of a growing up really for the business. We're similarly trying to do an update that we're just finishing off now for the website. And then I think it was just around the time we were talking to you last time, or it might have been just after, where we've just opened a Manchester office as like a second satellite office that's just trying to get up and going now. But that's been something where it was a natural step for somebody in the office to go over there and try and start that. And we work with clients over on that side of the hills as well, that it's seemed like a good opportunity to take forward. Brilliant.
Wonderful. So, I mean, and great news all round. What for you personally, I guess it would be interesting to has anything changed from a mindset perspective of from employment to equity shareholding? I know your role won't have changed. I know you've been very senior all the way through, but is anything changed in how you feel, how you view the business? Maybe nothing. So, but I'm just interested if anything has.
That's an intriguing question. I think there's a little bit of an added sense of reality of it, in terms of there's something that's definitely tangible in there, and it does mean that bit more and that bit more responsibility, I think. But all round, where I think over the past few years we've been building up to that as some targets and a point in time that it's going to happen, that it was very much, I think we were very much invested in that the business was essentially something that we were wedded to and taking forward. So in a very similar way of finally having that shareholding, the equity, that it makes it far more real. But it was, I think the whole attitude has been building over the last 2 years to that anyway. So it's the mindset, I don't think, has changed much. I think the biggest mindset shift was when it was that transition from being being more of an employee to being a director, and the way that moves and changes, that the book then is kind of stopping with you, and that puts a very different slant on your perspective of things.
Yes, I would totally understand that. I often say to business owners, leaders, directors, it's interesting in that the challenge of having your own business, a director owner of a business, is, as you said, the buck stops with us. There is ultimately responsibility that lands with us. But the great thing is you get to choose how it is. So we can.
I think that's the big challenge with it, that I'd always thought, I think up until the point of becoming a director, where you're a bit more detached from it. You look at a situation and think, well, I know what the answer should be, or I would have done this, and it's far easier. I think then in becoming a director where there isn't necessarily anybody above you, or you're the one that has to make the decision first.
Yes.
You question yourself far more. It's a far more difficult decision than it was previously.
That's a really good point, actually. Yes, there's no one at the next level we can go and ask, because ultimately we have to make that decision. And I know in my first business, we were moving so fast that I remember that I had to come to a principle of I make a decision. You know, you do as much research as you can, but you know, if it's an obvious decision, we probably made it too late. So you have to make those decisions with an element of risk. And I had to ultimately adopt a mindset of I'll make the decision and then by my action make it the right one. If that makes sense, we can never, as I say, you know, if it's a no-brainer, it's too late, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think once somebody's made a decision, it's very easy to pass judgment on it, but to be the one that makes the decision is a very different thing.
Absolutely. So, in business in general, but also obviously opening a new office in Manchester often come with challenges. What are the significant challenges that you've had over the last sort of 12 months or so, if any?
Well, with that, I think there's almost a mixture of things. In the last 12 months, there's been a lot of external pressures that everybody's probably felt in terms of the cost of living crisis, the way inflation's been pushing, the war in Ukraine in terms of how that had some impact on supply of materials and the construction projects that we're working on. So there are lots of things there that have been concerning, of course, little bumps along the way, but then actually work has generally carried on reasonably well, kind of notwithstanding that. There's certain sectors that have slowed down or dropped away in terms of like the residential market where people are a bit more cautious with money, but then other sectors have picked up the slack in that sense from our point of view. So overall as a business, that's not been too bad or any worse than anybody else. And then I think from general challenges, there's been lots of little things, but the biggest thing from my point of view, I think is just, as is probably ever the case now going forward, time of, we were chatting briefly about to start with in terms of how many different pressures there are on your time and how you manage that time well to deliver things or delegate things and where you want to be involved in projects, but it's probably not necessarily the right place. It's always trying to find that balance that you never quite get right, but doing the best you can with it.
Absolutely. I think time is one of the biggest challenges most people have in business now, and the demand, as we were talking just before we started, the demands just increase because of communication improvements and technology improvements. Technology has an ability in many areas to reduce our workload, but it's also in other parts of technology massively increased because we can be connected to people 24/7, I guess. And looking at the other wins, what are the great successes? I'm really conscious. I know you've won a very prestigious industry award recently. What alongside that, what are some of the other things that have been successes this year?
So I suppose the Insider Media Property Award for Consultancy of the Year was the big one for us. That was only a few weeks ago, so that was a great one to get, I suppose, recognition for what it feels like we've been developing and building as a company, and where we've got a great team of people, that it's a reflection of everybody, I think, pulling together, and the projects we've been working on that have brought that forward. That it was good in terms of the people that were there on the night, in terms of celebrating that, and it was a fantastic achievement. But then some of the follow-up afterwards, in terms of being back in the office with everybody and the kind of the pride that comes from that, and then just speaking to clients and colleagues sort of externally afterwards, where it's good feedback, and it almost gives people that opportunity to say, well, here's the good things about you, that when you're doing day-to-day work, it almost just gets brushed under. So it's nice to have some, I suppose, recognition for all those things, and it's positive. We are also nominated for an Investors in People award that's
great,
I think in November time, that's coming up, where again, that's a really nice, I suppose, reflection of where the business is, I think, as a whole, in that we've been trying to push the Investors in People accreditations. We've got a bit further, where we started it a couple of years ago, and it's gradually been building, and some of the feedback that comes from that is really useful for us managing the business, and then the kind of general ethos and culture we're trying to have in the business. So we'll see how that goes in a few weeks. And then I think from there, it's just I suppose some of the projects as well that we've always aimed to have quite a wide range of sectors projects to keep some resilience against up and downs in the market. But at the minute, a big one for us is we're working on the terminal extension at Leeds Bradford Airport that's just getting started.
Oh, great.
So for us as a relatively small business, that's quite a nice job to be involved in, where there's been a long-term relationship where we've helped the airport out with a multitude of things along the way in terms of just doing general surveys, some slight alterations and knockarounds, and then it's led on to this much bigger project.
Yep.
So it's worked well. And then there's various projects across the board that are all positive in terms of the relationships we have with clients that keep us going forward.
Wonderful. And how have you celebrated? I find very busy business people don't tend to be very good at celebrating. How have you managed, or have you managed to celebrate some of those wins?
No, I think you're quite right in terms of that. You almost get too busy in everything else that I don't think we've done a great deal to celebrate per se, in terms of, I think separately with family, we've had the little celebration and some drinks. I think, well, it's a nice achievement for everything you put in. But then in the office, we've not got around to doing anything as yet. That it might be nice to do something as a celebration of that. But it was the best it came to for us was the day after, just making butties around the office in terms of having some time to sit down and chat with everybody and congratulate ourselves.
It's a funny one. Most people don't. Most entrepreneurial people focus all their time on what they haven't achieved yet, rather than what they have. And
well, you're always on to the next, aren't you?
And it's understandable. The only challenge is, for me, resilience is part of building resilience is celebrating the wins to build those foundations, if you like, of success, so that when times are difficult, we know that we're good because of all these things. And it's quite an important thing. I do have to get quite a few of the people I work with to celebrate on a regular basis, because they're not very good at it. It's a bit of a trait, I think, of entrepreneurial people.
Yes.
And what would you say you've learned from both the successes and the challenges?
I think from all of it, almost where we've touched on and said how quick and fast-paced the world is. I think you've got to maintain those standards, that you're very much only as good as your last job. And I think that's very telling when you look at things where people have gone slightly wrong or not, and it's easy to slip up on things. I think one of the big ones is the overall teamwork in the office, where the kind of culture we've tried to foster, we've not got really strict or dedicated teams. It's quite a fluid structure in Dudleys and how we work and operate, with mixing people up and being a project team rather than a team of people that I would only work with. So there's some flexibility, and then it, I think, brings people to work together more. And it's always very much that attitude of it's a job for Dudleys and the business, rather than it's my job that I want to see done over somebody else's in the office. That it's trying to see it for that kind of greater good almost. And then I think the family support at home is always very important, that everybody's got it in slightly different ways. But for me, I think I end up at different times putting a lot of time and effort in, and it's where then in some instances my wife is the one that picks up the slack at home. And you need, I think, those different elements of, for business to be doing well, we've got to have the right people in the office delivering the work and projects, working together well as a team. But then it's got to be a good supportive environment at home, and having that mental switch off as well. And when you've talked about resilience, it's mental health kind of week. It was Mental Health Awareness Day yesterday, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
All those things are very telling, and you need that support and different people to rely on. Yeah,
bang on, absolutely bang on, brilliant. And that's great learnings there. And you may remember, I love collecting quotes and sayings that people use. Are there any ones you're using significantly at the moment, things that you fall back on a regular basis?
There's none that immediately spring to mind. I mean, the only one that it's almost not really a quote in terms of saying, one of the things that's we've almost joked about in the office is it's kind of along the lines of saying it's impossible to make anything foolproof because fools are so ingenious, in terms of it never ceases to amaze how what can go wrong on projects, or where we're trying to pick up the pieces for somebody where something's gone a bit wrong in lots of different shapes and forms. But I think that's the thing of, you just deal with what's in front of you and try and almost detach yourself from saying, well, how on earth has that happened? Why has it happened? I shouldn't be doing that. It's just the clients come to you with a problem. Let's try and sort it out for right or for wrong.
Love it. I really love that. That's great. It's not, so nothing's foolproof because fools are ingenious. I'd really like that. I'm just looking back from an IT tech background when things went wrong, and you just go, "Well, why did you do that?" And it's there. It's fantastic. I love that. Thank you. And what else have you learned about yourself as the business has grown and you've developed your career?
I think from my point of view, looking at myself, it's one of those where I think partly through that transition of the last few years between the director and then particularly now with, I suppose, having that more vested interest in the shareholding in business, it's probably a bit more confidence in myself of, I suppose, not only knowing what you do know that's got you to that point and able just to be good at your job, but equally almost having confidence in knowing what you don't know and not being as worried about that you are what you are, you've done well to get to that point. So just have that confidence in doing what you're doing, and you need to always rely on other people that are better at other things than you are, or whether it's technically better or people skills or whatever it may be. Everybody's got their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's just accept them for what they are and move forward with it. So that's been, I suppose, one of the key things that I feel like I've come to. And then the other one that dawned on me in terms of, it was only recently, is kind of almost going back to the mental health, that I think last time we spoke, we touched on that a little bit, where at that point recently had experience of a number of friends, family, colleagues in terms of, in lots of different ways, had struggled with mental health. And I had not quite, I think, sunk into me where I'd struggled a bit in terms of, I've never had any particular issues, but I found it almost as a bit of a telltale through where I do a bit of sports and running, that last year I run some half marathons, and it was where coming towards the end of those, I felt absolutely shattered, and it was like my head gave up in terms of there's no resilience there. Whereas then this year, where I think a number of things have settled down and my head's far clearer in that sense, that where I've then run a marathon, it felt like you got towards the end of that and you're tired and you're sore and you're almost wanting to give up. But then there's certain things where I felt far more equipped, that had that resilience in my mind to say, well, no, I can keep on pushing and going. I think it was that almost the mental load that you can take at times can wear you down where you don't quite realize it.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. The challenges we don't, we don't know necessarily we have a problem. If that, it is, and it's only in hindsight, perhaps when we're feeling better, that we really, that's really, really interesting point. And it's and being able to identify that in others, I think, is quite important from a leadership point of view, isn't it? Not necessarily at a detailed level, but just to be able to spot when.
I think it's really tricky. As I say, from my point of view, I never had any particular, I think, issues in that sense, but it was just very telling of different situations and different times, thinking, well, I've got far more mental resilience at different periods, and then there's obviously something telling there where you're getting to a point where you need to be mindful of it, and people can, I think, cover those issues very well, so it can be difficult to see it in others.
I saw a quote a while ago, and I thought it which I thought was really relevant. It was something like, people don't pretend to have a mental health challenge. It's not something people pretend. It's like people pretend not to have one. And that's the key thing. I appreciate it's something that people, like any sort of health issue, people can take advantage of if their attitude and behavior towards work is not the best. But people typically hide these challenges rather than expose them, and I think it's really important that we are open to being able to spot things if we can. But it's quite difficult. So looking forward, Peter, I mean, what a great year you've had. Looking forward, what does the future look like, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
Well, I think you go back 12 months, there's a number of things that nobody would have foreseen in terms of what's happened. So there's always unforeseen challenges around the corner. I think for us as a business, it's interesting where we're trying to grow and develop, but everything is constantly evolving. I think there's far more emphasis that we need to be aware of in social and environmental impacts of what we do. Yeah. So there's a lot more emphasis on the ESG, environmental social governance of projects and things, which is good. And I think we're working towards trying to do that with the investors in people a bit more, but there's going to be ever more stringent requirements that we need to update ourselves with in terms of sustainability, with something called biodiversity net gain, to try and make sure whatever you start with, you've got something better. As you develop and build, you've got things like the Building Safety Act that are coming forward. That's a bit of an unknown still in terms of exactly how that's going to look following Grenfell. So there's lots of technical challenges that will come along and regulatory requirements. And then an element that we've not really got into ourselves at Dudleys yet, I think the explosion of AI in terms of the last few months, this last year, has kind of come on, and there's far more discussion and talk around that I think the pace at which it's developing, that will become far more prevalent over the next 12 months. So it's going to be interesting to see where that develops generally, and then potentially where we need to try and embrace it or look at how we might be able to use it for the benefit of the business.
Yes, it is one of those classic sort of blessing and or curse, and it's about how we look at it. I think it's 100%. It's fascinating what it can enable, but it's also fascinating from what I've looked so far, it still requires us to ask the best question or specify the right thing for it to do what a lot would consider it donkey work in different industries or different professions. But yes, we're the same. I think it's everybody's looking at that, and if we're not, then we're probably falling behind. That's the reality, because if we're not looking at it, somebody else is in whatever.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. You've got to try and look at it. I don't think it'll be able to do a lot of the things we can do as people, but there are certain things where it can draw on lots of data or compare something previously and before. Like, I've heard people talking about using it almost for a planning enforcement type thing, of looking at aerial images to say, what was there before? Scan a big area. Well, why is that there now? Or what's changed? And that's something that the person would find very hard to do.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating. Oh, it would be good to actually, again, hopefully if we meet again at some point in the future, see how that's developed. I'll be fascinated in that. And do you have any new initiatives we should be looking out for this year?
I don't think there's anything definite we've set up for that. I think it's just almost that building on where we've got to now. So we're from the awards that we've done, the rebranding, it's trying to where we've built up a good business, and generally it's been progressed through kind of recommendation, word of mouth, that we've been a little bit more active now in terms of promoting ourselves, putting ourselves out there, doing far more on things like LinkedIn to try and be a bit more, have that, I suppose, awareness built up. So we'll keep going with that. It's trying to build the Manchester office is certainly a big thing, and then just making sure that we are keeping up to date with all these regulatory changes that we discussed in terms of what the future is going to bring, that it's trying to pick up with that and not get left behind.
Brilliant. Well, as I say, it'd be great to maybe reconnect in another 6-12 months and just see how things are developing and things are going. So again, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been fascinating. It's great to see how things are developing with you and with the business. And for anyone that is watching that might want to contact you or the company, what would be the best way to do so, Peter?
Well, by all means, if anybody wants to get in touch, look on the website, and if it's getting in touch, you're welcome to ring the office number and ask for myself, or there's an info@dudleys.co.uk email that is our general mailbox for inquiries. Brilliant. And it gets sent out to the appropriate person.
Wonderful. Well, again, thanks so much for your time. It's been really interesting again and fascinating, and be great to catch up again in the future.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Thank you for the time, Chris. It's one of those opportunities to just talk in a manner that you never get a chance to otherwise, really. So it's a fascinating reflection on things.
Absolutely, and I just love talking about business and what businesses do. I'll be starting to think about what's underneath a building when I'm in it. I'll be looking up a bit more myself. So thanks for sharing that with me.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.